With much of the talk about North Korea having subsided, many have forgotten that the US tried and failed to have a constructive meeting with the DPRK. The result was very minor concessions from the North Koreans and a relapse of hostilities between the two countries. The hopes that this most recent North Korean summit would lead to a more constructive dialogue have now been dashed with fears Washington cannot even get a fair deal. Because so many are asking, why did the most recent North Korea summit fail? North Korea and the US have had a long history of meetings since the DPRK's founding of their nuclear program. From the DPRK's perspective, this round of meetings is just another opportunity to make the US give concessions and to extract propaganda value. Also, the negotiations provide the North with time. As long as the DPRK is negotiating with the US, they would safeguard themselves from the possibility of sanctions because the White House does not want to derail any negotiation efforts. Thus, it is imperative for Pyongyang to make sure that negotiations go to nowhere, but also to provide superficial concessions to keep any meetings alive. Secondly, the blame for a failed North Korean summit can be partially on the US government, whose views on North Korea can vary from official to official. This was shown when John Bolton, National Security Advisor of the US, referred to the Libya model, harkening back to another denuclearization effort on Libya, which ended when the Obama administration helped topple Libyan dictator Gaddafi after he had given up his nuclear program. This comment was made by the tremendously hawkish Bolton, not by mistake, but likely to try to spook the North Koreans into abandoning talks and maintaining the status quo. Due to this hawkish group within the United States government, it is difficult to move ahead with negotiations as the Trump administration is divided on how to deal with North Korea. Additionally, the Americans had very little time to prepare for such a meeting like this, as the Trump administration went only from a few weeks to even hearing about the proposal of a meeting to shaking hands with Kim Jong un. However, the final and most important factor keeping North Korea from changing is China. Since the stakes are so high, as North Korea could collapse under the current sanctions, the CCP has been covertly giving aid to the North Koreans to make sure that North Korea survives. The reason to avoid these sanctions is that the last thing the Chinese government wants is a massive refugee crisis on the Chinese border. Because of this covert and questionably legal aid from China, North Korea now knows that it could bypass any new sanctions, as the Chinese are willing to give aid despite sanctions. Due to this, the seemingly destructive sanctions imposed on North Korea has gained the US not as much leverage that the Americans had hoped for, and has bolstered the North Korean government into continuing maintaining its nuclear weapons. So why did both sides agree to such a meeting? For North Korea, it is obvious. They can gain concessions, time, and near limitless propaganda value from the footage and news of their supreme leader shaking hands with Trump. But why would the US agree? The answer to that question could also be propaganda. According to a poll from Quinnipiac University, Trump had a 72% approval rating to meet with Kim Jong un, an unprecedented amount of support for almost any policy the president proposes. Adding to that, by having negotiations run indefinitely, Washington can point to the discussion as a way it is trying to create peace in the region. In short, the Trump administration looked optimistically at the chance to try to make a lasting change to the DPRK's nuclear program. This, however, was a stretch because of North Korea's opportunistic strategies with regard to these types of summits, hawkish internal politics within the United States, and the fact that North Korea knows that China will always be by their side, even in the face of sanctions. Due to these factors, it is safe to say that in the near future, North Korea's nuclear program isn't going anywhere.